In this podcast episode, Ben Shapiro discusses the prevalence of a new religion in the United States known as secular leftism. This religion demands blind belief in narratives presented by the media rather than looking at facts. Shapiro highlights the case of a 16-year-old gender non-binary individual named Nex Benedict who died under disputed circumstances in an Oklahoma high school. The media initially reported that Nex was beaten to death in a girls' bathroom altercation, which was used to push against laws in Oklahoma that require students to use bathrooms on their biological sex. The media ran with the story, portraying Nex as a victim of a hate crime and blaming individuals for inciting violence. However, the autopsy results revealed that Nex's death was not a result of trauma, contradicting the initial narrative. Despite this, the media continued to push the story, ignoring the facts and focusing on the narrative they wanted to promote. Shapiro points out that this pattern of ignoring facts in favor of narratives is not new. He references past cases like the Matthew Shepard incident, where the media portrayed Shepard as a victim of a hate crime based on his sexual orientation, only to later discover that the story was largely fabricated. Shapiro argues that when the media and society prioritize narratives over facts, it leads to the promotion of false information and misguided policies. Shapiro also discusses the recent decision by Yale University to reverse its test-optional policy and require standardized test scores for applicants. This decision reflects the acknowledgement that standardized test scores are a better predictor of student success than other factors like life experiences or essays. Other elite universities like Dartmouth and Brown are following suit, recognizing the importance of standardized testing in evaluating applicants. Shapiro argues that the college experience has deviated from its original purpose of teaching life skills, making students better citizens and increasing intelligence. Instead, colleges have become focused on credentialing students based on standardized tests like the SAT and ACT. He points out that the Supreme Court banned the use of IQ tests for employment, leading colleges to use SAT and ACT scores as a proxy for intelligence. However, the elimination of these tests has led to a watering down of the college credential, diminishing its value. Shapiro discusses the rise of the Muslim population in the UK, particularly in cities like London, where approximately 15% of the population is Muslim. He highlights incidents of Islamic extremism and terrorism in the UK, including attacks on members of parliament and threats against politicians who support Israel. Shapiro points out the challenges faced by politicians, such as wearing stab vests for protection and receiving threats from radical groups. Shapiro criticizes the response of UK politicians, including Mayor Sadiq Khan, who called for a ceasefire in Gaza amid escalating violence between Israel and Hamas. He highlights the anti-Israel sentiment in the UK Parliament, with members facing pressure to condemn Israel for defending itself. Shapiro discusses the projection of genocidal slogans on Big Ben and the lack of action by the Metropolitan Police to address hate speech. The podcast culminates in the chaos that erupted in the UK Parliament during a debate on ceasefire motions. The Speaker of the House of Commons allowed for multiple amendments, including a conservative motion calling for a ceasefire if Hamas freed Israeli hostages and relinquished control of Gaza. The Scottish National Party put forward a resolution urging an immediate ceasefire and condemning the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. The tense atmosphere in Parliament reflects the deep divisions and challenges posed by multiculturalism and political extremism in the UK. Shapiro then shifts the focus to U.S.-Russia relations. He mentions Joe Biden's meeting with the widow of Alexei Navalny and comments made by Biden calling Putin a crazy sob. Shapiro discusses the escalating sanctions on Russian targets and the lack of clarity in U.S. policy towards Ukraine. He criticizes the Biden administration for not taking stronger actions against Russia and for failing to use the power of the U.S. LNG industry to undercut Russian influence. The conversation moves on to a recent Alabama Supreme Court ruling that embryos deserve constitutional rights, leading to anxiety among patients and doctors involved in vitro fertilization, IVF. Shapiro explains the logic behind the ruling, stating that if life begins at conception, then embryos deserve protection, regardless of their location. He acknowledges the political implications of the ruling, as Democrats are using it to argue against IVF and paint Republicans in a negative light. Shapiro discusses the impact of the Alabama Supreme Court decision on fertility options and the pause in embryo transfers at a clinic. He clarifies that the ruling does not equate a failed embryo thaw with murder, but rather as an accident that can occur in the process of IVF. Shapiro emphasizes the need for more careful use of IVF and consideration of how many embryos should be fertilized and implanted.